From time to time, we all need to raise our game. Moving to new levels in leadership takes dedication, inspiration, and a lot of hard work. Today, my guest, Alan Stein Jr. and I discuss his inspiration behind his book, Raise Your Game, 3 common issues facing leaders and organizations, and 9 key lessons in raising your game. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 72, Raise Your Game with Alan Stein Jr. Welcome one, welcome all to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you here. It's your host and founder, Scott McCarthy, and welcome to a podcast revolving around you, the leader. Whether you are just starting your leadership journey, whether you're a seasoned leader just looking to grab more inspiration, more practical advice and tips, or you're someone who's interested in making the leap to a leadership role, this podcast is all for you. I take my 20-odd years of leadership experience and go out and find world-class guests like mine today of Alan Stein Jr. and extract their knowledge to help you overcome your difficulties that you have day to day in your leadership journey. Before I dive into talking about my guest today, I got one announcement only. And that is, I'm proud to announce that in the coming near future, I'll be releasing the Moving Forward Leadership Power Goals program. This program is all designed about helping you achieve whatever goals you have in your personal life or your professional life. If you've been struggling at obtaining goals in the past, if you can't seem to figure out how to pick the right goals for you, if you're unable to establish a program, a system, then this is for you. This program is going to allow you to systematically determine what goals are important and how to go about achieving them. So if that sounds right up what you need to work on, then just go to movingforwardleadership.com/power and sign up to the VIP newsletter solely for the launch of the Power Goals system. And from there, I'll be pushing out more information as the time comes. So again, that's movingforwardleadership.com/power. Now on to today's guest, Alan Stein Jr. He's a performance coach, a consultant, speaker, and of course, an author. Something a little different. He's actually been spending the past 15 years working on the highest performing basketball players on the planet. Alan strives to inspire and empowers everyone he works with to take immediate action and improve their mindset, habits, and productivity. So essentially, he teaches you how to utilize the same strategies in business that elite athletes use to perform at the world-class level, such as in the NBA. So it's a super interesting episode, slightly different than what we've had in the past, but nonetheless, it's highly valuable, and you're going to get a lot out of this. So, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy my discussion with Alan Stein Jr. discussing how you can raise your game. Al, my man, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you here.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. This is going to be a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Been looking forward to it for quite some time now. Since we first connected, I reached out to you and you said that you'd come on the show. But before we dive into, the nuts and bolts of the podcast today, I'd just like for you to give the audience a quick, summary of your background, who you are, where you come from, and basically how you got to where you are today. So why don't we start with that first?
Sure. I am a 43-year-old amicably divorced father of 3 kids. I live just outside of Washington, D.C. This is my hometown where I grew up as well. Basketball was my first identifiable passion as a kid. I fell in love with the game at 4 or 5 years old, and here at 43, almost 4 decades later, the game is still a major pillar in my life. I was able to play college basketball down in North Carolina at a school called, it was Elon College at the time. It's now Elon University. And then upon graduation, became a basketball performance coach and spent almost 20 years working with elite youth and high school age players here in the DC area, which then led to some gigs with Nike and Jordan Brand and USA Basketball, which allowed me to get a chance to observe firsthand the best players in the world, Kobe and LeBron and Steph Curry and all those guys. And then a couple of years ago, I decided to take everything that I'd learned through the game and translate that into the business world. And I'm now a professional speaker and author, and teach businesses how to utilize the same strategies in business that elite athletes and elite coaches use to perform at a high level. So I teach folks how to improve leadership, team cohesion, culture, accountability, habits, all of that stuff.
That's pretty cool background. I will admit you're probably the first person I've had on the show. You were definitely the first person I've had on the show with a background so deep in the basketball realm. And I will let you know out of the gate, no offense or anything, I'm not a basketball guy. I'm a hockey guy. Hockey is life.
That's okay. Oh yeah, no, it is. And one of the cool things I've learned, still the principles and strategies that I share, having learned in basketball, I can promise you they're applicable to hockey. I can promise you they're applicable to just about any business or organization one could be a part of. So it's okay if someone doesn't like basketball or watch basketball or even care about basketball. My job is to simply take the nuggets that I've learned from the game and translate them to any audience. So whether someone likes basketball or not, thankfully, is irrelevant.
No, absolutely. And I think that's actually the mark of, great content and a great ideology is that you can take that and overlay it no matter where, and it will still fit as long as you look through it through that scope, right?
Yep.
And that's what I from everything I've seen of your book and everything I've heard about and dived into, that's exactly why I wanted you on the show. Is like, okay, this isn't about basketball. This is actually about anything and everything that people want to relate it to. So
absolutely. And really it's about improving performance.
Right.
And one of the things we all need to do is broaden our definition of performance. I think when the average person hears the word performance, they usually relegate that to sport, or to the arts, a musician, or an actor. They picture somebody like Beyonce performing on stage, or the cast of Hamilton, or a hockey team. But we perform in every area of our lives, and we certainly would perform as leaders. We perform as teammates. We perform as mothers and fathers, as husbands and wives. We perform in every area of our life. And I found that performance is directly tied to our own self-worth and our own confidence and our own belief. So when we can improve performance in different areas of our life, it raises every other level. So I would hope that not only would someone in sport or in business feel like they got something out of the book, but even someone that was just a parent trying to parent at a higher level would also be able to get something out of it. So performance is vital for all of us to try to improve with intention.
Yeah, you just took some serious words right out of my mouth, and I love that whole ideology, because you're right, we do perform no matter what. And I was actually thinking that my point that I was going to add on was, I look at myself and how I perform as a father and how I perform as a husband, and you literally said it as I was thinking it. So it's great to be on the same page. So
absolutely.
Can you talk about the inspiration behind the book? Because I always find that interesting. Why do people do what they do? And most importantly, why do authors write about what they write about?
Well, on the most macro level, it was, I've been very fortunate to have been around many of basketball's highest performers, some when they were teenagers at the high school level, and then others once they'd already matriculated up and became NBA stars. And I'm very thankful that I had those opportunities. And I also realized that most people have not had a chance to take a peek behind the curtain and see what those guys do in unseen hours. So I almost felt a sense of obligation in a good way to share all of that stuff. As a coach, I learned very early in my career that a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. And that if I have some information that could be of value to someone else, it's something I should willingly share with others, and so on a very macro level, just being able to share things that I'm very thankful I was able to learn firsthand is kind of my way of giving back to the coaching community, giving back to the business community. So that was probably the number one reason. As we look at some of the more rather superficial reasons, it's always been a bucket list item of mine. I've been a voracious reader ever since college, and I've had so many books really leave their mark on me and change my perspective and challenge me, and to the point where I was almost seeing the world differently after reading some of these books. And the thought that I might be able to create something that could be of value to someone else really excited me and gave me a high sense of fulfillment. So it was a bucket list item for sure. Another rather superficial reason, and I don't say superficial in a bad way by any means, but one with a little less depth, was I spent 20 years building up a resume and brand recognition and credibility in the basketball space. And then I up and left all of that to go into the corporate space where I had zero brand recognition, zero credibility. Nobody knew who I was. And I knew that writing a book would be a way to raise those, that it would instantly give me more credibility and would be kind of a way to increase my ability to speak at the corporate level. And it's proven so. I mean, there have been so many times where someone's reached out and said, "Hey, I read your book. A friend recommended it. I'd love to have you come in and share these principles with my business or my team." So, those really were all of the reasons on why I wrote it. And I'll absolutely be doing a second book, once I feel that I've got enough content worth sharing that warrants it.
Those are some great points in there. And I especially like the beginning on how you talked about giving back, because in my mind, leaders are all about developing others, right? Leaders need to and should be developing other leaders. So absolutely love those points. And no, man, good on you and well done. And I like the bucket list item too. I'll fully admit it's on mine too. It'll be done. It will be done because, like you, my bookcase is they're running right around here full.
Yes, absolutely. Mine in as well. And, with that kind of pay it forward mentality, it's funny. I've got a pretty full bookcase that I'm looking at here in my office, but it probably only has maybe a fourth of my books, because most of the other ones, after I read them and I've taken notes, I just give them to someone else, because really them sitting on my shelf, if I know that I'm not going to use them again as some type of resource, I mean, they're just basically decoration. So I would much rather the book find a home with someone else, especially if it was one that was very impactful to me. Why not pay it forward and share it, with somebody else? So, yeah. And now that I'm looking at this bookshelf, I'm already thinking of some of these books and some names of some colleagues and friends that I probably should just give them to and see if I can thin this thing out a little bit more.
No, I do something very similar. I receive a lot of review edition books, and for people that want to come on the podcast, and what I end up doing is most of the time just end up sending them out. And actually, I think one listener right now should be receiving a package unbeknownst to them that with 2 books in it. That's
awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely agree.
Well, books are meant to be read. And I know, one of the good things about the internet is you can find just about anything on it. But one of the bad things about the internet is you don't always know the validity. But the few times I've kind of looked up the stats on the percentage of books that are purchased that are actually read, and it is alarmingly low. I think it's kind of like the gym membership. Some people think that just getting the gym membership, it gives them a sense of accomplishment to the point where they don't even go, but they feel kind of good about themselves. They've got the Gold's Gym, card on their keychain, and they feel proud that they're a member of a gym, but they don't actually work out. And it's the same thing. People buy a book and that gives them a sense of accomplishment. And, as an author and as a voracious reader, I realize, step 1 is getting the book. Step 2 is reading the book. And that's a major hurdle for most people. But then the most important part, step 3, is actually implementing what's in the book or making a change to your behavior. When I was growing up, I was always told that knowledge is power. And I don't believe that. In fact, I think that's very incomplete. It's the application of knowledge that's powerful. Just knowing something does nothing. So just having a book on your bookshelf does nothing. Reading a book but not changing any of your behavior does nothing. So I really intentionally tried to write a book that I'm hoping was a fairly simple and easy read, something that was organized very logically and had some powerful nuggets and takeaways that were very basic and very simple that someone could put into action. Because I wanted to write a book that people would read and then people would act upon. And, I'm not the judge of whether or not I did that. The judge is in the people that read it. And since the book is still rather new, I'm still kind of collecting some feedback on that. But that's really the whole point of doing a book, is to provide something that's going to help someone induce a change in their life.
I love the whole application of knowledge part. I couldn't agree with you more, man. Absolutely. So on that note, let's dive into some of the content within your book. So in your outline, you got 3 common issues facing leaders and organizations. Can you kind of run those down, just dive into them individually a little bit from your standpoint?
Well, yeah. And I try to keep things as basic as possible. And I know that when you're talking about the complexities of any business or organization, that there's a lot, there's a lot to unpack. But I've noticed that, whether it's a sport team or it's a business, that there are 3 rather common issues. One of them's ineffective leadership, which I figured would be one of the main things we would talk about. One is team dysfunction, and one is low performance. And many times those things are tied together. You can't compartmentalize them. I do believe that everything starts and ends with leadership, that any team or organization can only be as good as the leadership. And as you already mentioned, leaders, they pour into others, they fill others' buckets, they empower others, they induce change. And getting as many people to have a sense of ownership and feel like they are leaders on a team is really important. And that means that the leader or the coach or the CEO, they have to be very secure and very confident in themselves to be able to empower and encourage and educate others. And that's not always easy to do. But it's something that leaders must do. So with ineffective leadership, there's a very low ceiling on how good a team or an organization can be.
I actually find those 3 things are essentially in a system. Ineffective leaders, and you end up having dysfunctional teams, which ends up leading to poor performance, right?
Yes. Very much so. Yes, they are all interconnected, and it's leadership is at the top because that's what sets the foundation for everything else. And when we talk about the others, I'll just touch on them. With team dysfunction, usually there's 2 things. One is some level of selfishness. It's people that believe me is more important than we, can often lead to major dysfunction. And then almost any dysfunction is within a couple of degrees of communication, or most times poor communication or miscommunication. But communication is vital for a team to thrive and not make assumptions, not assume that everybody knows what you're thinking, or assume they know what their role is, or assume they know you appreciate them. In order to alleviate as much dysfunction as possible, we have to have very effective communication. And I don't believe that all selfishness is bad. I do think that certain types of selfishness can be harnessed for the greater good of the group. However, selfishness that undermines the core beliefs and philosophies and culture will always be a problem. And then, like you said, these things line up nicely, because if you have ineffective leadership and you have team dysfunction, there's only one result possible, and that's low performance.
I like to emphasize one point there. And actually, I just released the podcast yesterday with my top 5 qualities of leadership, and lo and behold, communication's right in there. And there's two sides to that coin, I find. One is obviously the leader needs to be able to communicate his vision, his intent, etc., to his team, but also needs to be able to foster communication amongst the team, so that he's not the only, or she's not the only person that's doing all of the communication, right? Because the leader's not always there. They're often off in meetings or on trips or whatever, but the team still needs to operate. Did you dive into any aspects along those lines within your book?
Oh, absolutely. And you're right on. And, one of the things when it comes to communication that's incredibly important, and I love that you said that communication needs to be all encompassing. Everyone needs to have a certain openness. And this is why emotional intelligence is so important, and being able to know your teammates and know your colleagues and coworkers, know how is the most effective way to communicate with them, know their learning styles and their preferences, learn to speak their language instead of forcing them to speak yours. And as we really uncover communication, there's 2 major points that always need to be highlighted. One is how important listening is. Most people default to thinking communication is just talking. But the best leaders I've ever been around are some of the best listeners that I've ever been around, because listening shows someone that you care about them, and caring is the glue that bonds any team. So listening is vital. And then, the other part we have to look at when it comes to communication is you're always communicating something. Even when you don't think you're communicating, you are sending a message. And leaders in particular have to be very intentional with the unconscious messages that they send. One that I use as an example in all of my keynotes and workshops is if you're working on an important project and you delegate part of that to a teammate, well, the unconscious message you send them is, I trust you. I believe in you. I know you're competent enough to help me with this. And this is something that's very important. I need you. And that's something that will strengthen a connection between two teammates or between a leader and someone on the team. Conversely, and this happens a lot, if as a leader you micromanage, you basically either literally or figuratively stand over someone's shoulder, breathing down their neck while they do everything. Well, now you're sending the opposite communication, unconscious message. You're telling them, I don't believe in you. I don't trust you. In fact, I think you're such a moron that there's no way you'll get this right if I'm not standing next to you. And that's going to erode your connection. And every single interaction you have with another human being, you're either strengthening a human connection or you're eroding it. Those are the only two things possible. And as leaders, to alleviate dysfunction, we need to make sure we are very intentional about strengthening every connection that we can, and that we're always filling other people's buckets instead of draining them.
Oh, so many great points in there. Man, knowledge bombs being dropped. I love it. And I love the point about the micromanaging leader. I don't even refer to them as leaders because I despise it so much. I refer to them as bosses. And actually, my mission here moving forward leadership is rid as much as I can the world of quote unquote bosses, right? Those micromanagers, those ones that actually don't care about their people, they just care about themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And I can tell you firsthand, some of the worst organizations I've been in, some of the worst bosses I've worked for are those exact types. They're micromanaging to the point where the staff gets stressed out.
Yep.
And it absolutely hinders the performance of the organization as a whole.
Yeah.
And it's so apparent. It's insane.
Well, and I love that you brought that up because, I'm someone that really studies and loves language, and I love vernacular and studying terminology and so forth. And every single word, above and beyond its literal definition, has an emotional connotation with all of us. And now they may be different. And this is why there is no right or wrong. For me, one of the biggest words out there now that everybody talks about, especially on social media, is grind. You got to grind. You got to grind.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like that word, and I don't use that word because it doesn't have a positive connotation to me. Now, this isn't to no way say that it's not a good word or that people that believe in the grind are wrong. No, that's just the way the word strikes me. Well, same thing. I mean, when I hear the word boss, that's a very negative connotation. I don't even like the word employee. To me, it implies that someone is subservient to someone else. I prefer colleagues and coworkers. It doesn't matter where we are on the org chart. If I'm the CEO and I'm the top of the org chart and you are the building service staff and you're at the bottom of the org chart, I would still call us colleagues. We are coworkers. Yes, my role of running the company is different than yours, but we are both puzzle pieces on this puzzle, and we are both important, and we both have roles, and we both should be respected and appreciated. So for me, and with the companies I work with, I try to get them to not use terminology like boss and employee, but rather colleagues and coworkers, just because it sends a different message. And yes, everyone's going to have a different role on the team. Everyone's going to be compensated differently. Everyone's going to have different titles, different positions on the org chart. That stuff is fine. But we're a part of a team, and I don't want anyone to ever feel less than or subservient to someone else. So, if I was in a position where I was technically the quote unquote boss, I would not allow folks to call me that. I would say, look, you don't work for me. We work with each other. And yeah, you may have to report to me with certain things, but we work together. And I've always believed from a leadership standpoint that it's your job to serve your people. It's not their job to serve you. That in fact, the higher up you are on an org chart and the more people that are underneath you, it's the more people you serve, not the more people that serve you. And to me, a leader that has that mindset is going to eliminate a lot of dysfunction.
There are so many great points in there. I can give you firsthand practical, example that attitude actually works. And I think the first off thing that leaders need to understand out there is that you got to have humility for that type of mentality, right?
Yes.
You have to believe, that everybody's equal. And by day, I'm a senior Army officer in the Canadian Army.
Oh, nice.
And my last post was I was a commander of a squadron of 200 soldiers, and I would have meetings with all 200 and jam-packed in this theater, and it'd be basically question and answer time. And I would have the no-hook private. So I'm talking like fresh out of boot camp, fresh out of basic level training, brand new into the unit, and they would put their hands up and they'll go, sir, and they'll ask me a question, and I'd go back to them with either sir or ma'am. And, we're talking about essentially miles of distance, of difference and distance amongst the chain of command between me and that person. But it's not about my rank. It's about my respect for that individual as a member of my squadron and as a member of the forces and as a member, as a human being. So it just helps even the playing field out a little bit to give them the sense that, yes, you're good enough, you belong, and you're respected here in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And that's why this again goes back to unconscious messages, that when you refer to yourself as the boss and you refer to them as employees, you are unconsciously creating a separation. You are unconsciously saying you are less than me, that I'm in charge of you. And I know that it's, that's common vernacular. Again, I'm not saying that any company out there that refers to their people as employees is wrong. Some of the biggest and most successful companies in the world do that. I'm just saying that that's how those words strike me, which means there's a good chance that someone in your organization, they strike them the same way. And if you do have the humility, but blended with the confidence of being a strong leader, then why would you really care what labels you put on someone? As a leader, if your job is to empower someone, then you want to bring them up to your level, not try to create separation between you and them, which means, I can't think of anything more empowering than a CEO that would look at one of the new hires and say, hey, we're colleagues, we're coworkers. Yes, I'm compensated a lot more than you are, and I have a much nicer corner office, but that part doesn't matter. When it comes to the nitty-gritty of this team, we are all in this together, and there's nothing for me as the CEO that is beneath me, and there's nothing here that you can't accomplish. And that's the mark of an exceptional leader. One of my favorite examples, Mike Jones, who's the head basketball coach at DeMatha Catholic High School, which is one of the top high school programs in the country, will always sweep the floor before every practice, every game, and every workout. And clearly, DeMatha has building service staff that can do it. They have managers that can do it. He could even ask the freshman team to do it. But he chooses to do it because it models for him, models for the team, and it reminds him that nothing is beneath him as the leader, that every single person on the team should be willing to do any other job if needed for the greater good of the group. And I just have so much respect for a guy that's willing to do that. And he does it every single day just to remind himself that nothing is beneath me. And there's actually a sign hanging up at the Facebook headquarters in New York that says, nothing is someone else's job. And I love that. It means no matter who reads that, from Mark Zuckerberg all the way down to employee 6,000, they know that not like taking out the trash is something everyone's capable of doing.
That's so much great stuff. And I love that sign. I need to put that one up in my next job once I go back to command for sure. I know we've kind of skirted around, we've hit some of these, but I'd like to do a little bit more of a deep dive in your 9 key lessons that you have in there and that you've, through your research that you've brought out. So can you just go over those and maybe we can deep dive into a couple of them for the audience out there?
Yeah. And if someone goes to raiseyourgamebook.com, these are some of the nuggets and things that I've highlighted on there that I'm hoping people will find value in, even if they choose not to get or read the book. But, a few of them, I knew firsthand, and then a few of them, I actually, learned through doing some research. But, one of my favorites that I tell all the time in my keynotes was, about Arthur Blank. And this goes back to our talking about how important listening is. Arthur Blank's the co-founder of Home Depot. He's the current owner of the Atlanta Falcons. And back when Home Depot first started, he would wait by one of their flagship stores out in the parking lot, and he'd have a yellow legal pad and a clipboard and a pen. And anytime someone would leave his store empty-handed, he would walk up to them and start asking them questions. He wanted to know why someone would leave his store empty-handed. He couldn't figure it out. I mean, his goal was to build a home improvement mega store, so he couldn't figure out how someone could leave without buying anything. And if they did leave empty-handed, he'd ask question after question. Did we not have what you were looking for? Did we have it, but it was too expensive? Was it not the style that you wanted? Could you not find it? And we didn't have a decent enough customer service to help you find it. And he wanted to find out. And then he would start to take note after note and listen. And then he would look for trends. And then he would start to make some changes, which is incredibly important as a leader, is acting upon the information that you gather. So if he found out that 8 out of 10 people that came into Home Depot were looking for a hammer, well, then he would make sure that hammers were front and center when you walked in the store, and that there were a variety of different hammers at different price points, and that his staff knew everything there was to know about all of the different hammers, because that's what the people wanted. And the only reason he was, the only reason he was able to build a Home Depot, conglomerate like that was because of his ability to listen to what the people wanted. And there's stories on there from, Howard Schultz of Starbucks, and the Domino's CEO, and Mark Cuban, who I had a chance to interview, the guy that runs the owner of the Mavericks. There's so many stories of these really successful businesses that have done things similar to that we all should be learning from, and should be able to take that and apply that to anything that we do.
I absolutely love the practical, examples that you got going on, because I find it's just so easy for people out there to talk theory. And don't get me wrong, theory is important. Theory has its place, but people need to know how to employ it, right? And there's nothing better that does it than practical examples, such as, the Home Depot one you just gave there. Cause that is leadership. The guys out there, I'm sure as CEO, he had better things to do with his time, but you know what? There's nothing beneath him. And that store is his baby. So he wants to make sure that it's taken care of properly, but it even goes beyond, someone could say, well, he could have delegated someone to do that for sure. But that means he actually valued his people's time, because they were in the store handling what customers were in there. And he was getting the information that was needed for them to turn around and do their jobs better on his behalf. So
absolutely.
Right. That's just such a great example. You got any more up your sleeve like that? Because I love that one.
Well, the other one that I have on there, Mark Cuban, who is the owner of the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA. Yeah. I mean, when he bought the Mavericks, they weren't just the worst team in the NBA. Many people thought they were the worst in all of professional sports. So that includes the NHL, Major League Baseball, NFL. And one of the very first things he did when he bought the team was he drastically updated their locker room, their travel accommodations. He got a new jet. He did all of these things. And people were like, what are you doing? Why are you rewarding these group of losers with nicer stuff? And he basically said, look, our players are not going to perform like champions until you treat them like champions. If you want them to value each other and value the game and value what their role is, then we have to value them. And, it sounds almost dramatic, like it was a Hollywood movie, but, within a few years after him doing that, they actually won an NBA championship. And he really believes that it's because you have to think and act and treat everyone like a champion first before you can ever become one.
No, that is so key. And I've said it so many times. I remember talking to my subordinates in my last job, and I'm like, no, we're going to treat everybody like adults. If they want to act like children, it's something different, but we'll make sure that we treat them like adults all the time. And, publicly, everybody's your number one, member, employee, whatever you want to refer to them as. Publicly, everybody's the best there is. And I used to always say, to my squadron, I'm like, this is the best squadron. And I kept, from day one, I said that to them. And I just kept every day. And publicly, I'd be in, we would have a meeting with my boss and my colleagues at the same rank level and all that. And I would be like, yeah, we're the best. and by the end, it was like, no, people start believing it. When you as a leader start, acting that way and projecting that, people start believing it. And when people believe it, that's how they start acting and relating, right? So awesome examples. Alma, man, wow, time is flying.
I know, it goes by quick, doesn't it? I love it.
It's amazing. So, just before we wrap up here, I got one last question for you, and then I'll flip the mic over. One last question I always ask all my guests, and that is to you, Alan, what makes a great leader?
I mean, there's a variety of different things, but I think at the most foundational level, it's caring. That you have to care about two things in particular. You have to care about your mission and your vision, where you're trying to take everyone, and you have to care about the people that you're leading. So yes, there's so many other things that go into being a good leader. But I think at the foundation, it has to be caring. If you don't care about your people and you don't care about where you're going, then the other stuff will start to erode.
You know, I could have probably foreseen that coming. It kind of wraps everything up nicely from the beginning of what you were talking about, the reasons why you wrote the book in the first place, because there's definitely aspects of that to what makes an ideal leader. That's awesome, man. So I'm going to flip the mic over. Feel free to give yourself a shameless plug. Where can people find you? Where can they get the book, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
For sure. Well, they can go to raiseyourgamebook.com. And a lot of the things that you and I just talked about, they're actually on the site for free. And you can also go to alansteinjr.com to see what I've got cooking, from a speaking standpoint. And then I'm very active on social media. So you can just follow me, and engage at Alan Stein Jr. On Instagram, on LinkedIn. I love talking shop with folks on social. So if someone's listening to this and something struck a chord, or you have a question, or you just want to talk shop, please hit me up on your preferred social platform and we'll get some dialogue going. But no, I very much appreciate your time and enjoyed our conversation immensely.
Absolutely. And for the audience out there, as always, it's easy for you guys. Just go to movingforwardleadership.com/7272 and everything's going to be in the show notes because I literally have already put it in there. So again, Alan, man, I appreciate you, appreciate your time. I'm definitely looking forward to grabbing my hands on a copy of your book and sitting back with a cup of coffee and reading it, because I know it's jam-packed with lots of greatness. So again, man, thanks for coming out and speaking to the audience today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode with my guest. And remember always, if this resonated with you, then keep in mind R²S². Rate and review so that more people can find the podcast and I can help more people grow their leadership skills, aid them in their leadership journey, because that's what I'm here for, helping more people. Finally, share this episode with someone who you think it may resonate with. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And if this wasn't enough for you in your leadership journey, then feel free to swing by movingforwardleadership.com for all the resources related to Moving Forward Leadership. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, keep pushing, keep trying, keep moving forward. Take care now.